welcome back. Today I'm sharing my 5 ultimate glute exercises that took my glute transformation from this to this. Firstly, most important is to understand the anatomy of the hip joint, since that is where the glute muscles attaches. So the glute muscles basically attaches to the bone of the hip joint and it connects it to the iliac bone, that is your pelvis, and the pelvis goes onto the sacrum and then becomes the spine. Your glute muscles will basically then determine the position that your body would be, how upright it would be. So it would control the amount of flexion and extension happening in your hips. The position that you are in while you are training determines the amount of stretch that is placed on the glute muscle. And that determines which fibers of the glute muscle you are targeting. So that's very important to remember if you want to shape your glute muscle, because you need to focus on which fibers you want to target. So these 5 exercises are the ones that targets all the fibers of the glute muscles in different ways, and that is why I included them into my workout program. So let's get straight into it. So the first exercise is the glute kickback. So this exercise mainly focuses on glute maximus. So it is the outermost superficial glute muscle that you will find. I love this exercise because it involves a full range of movement. So when your leg is in this position, it's basically in a flexed position. So the hip joint is open. The glute muscle is stretched at its full range. And when your hip is going back into this position, it is basically in a closed position. So now the glute muscle is shortened. So the nice thing about the glute kickback is that it exercises the full glute through the open range and the closed range. And that's why it's very important that while you do this exercise, you must try to keep your lower back still, because you don't want to do lumbar extension. Then you'll be using your lumbar erector spine muscles, and you want to keep them still so that the glute muscle is doing the main movement. You really want to feel a nice squeeze in the bum. The best way for me to feel the squeeze is to pretend that I am pushing my heel away from me. So I'm pushing my heel backwards. If you're standing completely upright, you can pretend to kick your heel into the wall that is right parallel to you, behind you. If you are quite arched with your body, you can pretend to kick your leg slightly upwards in a diagonal direction towards the ceiling. Really think of pressing your heel into the wall. That's going to give the best contraction. And another thing to be careful with the glute kickback is not to stretch your femoral nerve. So the femoral nerve comes out at joints 1 to 4 in the spine, and then it extends into the front of the leg. So it basically goes through the iliopsoas and here underneath the quad muscle, and it can really stretch. The more you bend your knee, the more stretch you will put on your femoral nerve. If you keep your knee just slightly bent, not fully bent, then it won't put that much stretch on the nerve. The most important thing is you should be aware of a stretch feeling that you feel in your anterior thigh, your front thigh. If you feel a very strong pull there, then do not push much further into that range. Maybe just extend your knee a little bit. It might vary from person to person because not everybody's hips are the same. You are born with a congenital type of hip, and it might be sitting a little bit more outwards or inwards, but just stay in your comfortable range with your hip. Also on my list is the side plank. Now the side plank mainly focuses on the glute medius, and the glute medius is the muscle doing abduction of your hip. So it's the muscle that lifts your leg away from your body, and it also really stabilizes the hips when you are standing. So it prevents the one from going up or down. So I really like the side plank exercise because it starts in a neutral position already against weight, and then it moves into the shortened position. So it's going to mainly target your lower fibers of the glute medius, and in the starting position or the hip at the bottom, it is actually targeting the proximal fibers of the glute med, because you're just trying to stabilize. So with this exercise, you're actually hitting both sides, but the glute muscle that's at the bottom closest to the ground is the one that's going to do the most work. With the side plank, it's really important to get your elbow positioning correct. You want the elbow to be in line with your shoulder, not too much down, not too much up, because you're going to hurt something up there. So you want this positioning to be right. It is nice that this exercise also focuses on shoulder stability, although that is not the aim. We are aiming at the glute muscle. But it is a nice all-rounder. One common error is people might place their knees too much in front of their body or too much behind their body. So you want your knees to be in a straight line with your shoulders. And then also you do not want to push too much on your foot on the ground, because you don't want to work your foot rotators. You only want to work your glutes. So try to keep your foot still. Try to mainly push the force through your knee and not use your feet. And I like to do this exercise with my knees bent, because then I'm taking the feet out of the equation, so I know I'm going to get most of the force out of my glute. The third exercise on the list is the single leg deadlift. The third, I really like this one because this is where you can focus on that glute hamstring tie-in that everybody wants. With this exercise, you are focusing on the proximal fibers of the glute, because the hip is in an open position, and also the proximal fibers of the hamstring, and that's where it will tie into the glute. So this is a nice one to target both of them. The most important thing here is that your knee should be slightly bent, because you do not want to stretch your sciatic nerve. So the sciatic nerve comes out from joints number 4 up until S4, and they go down the back of the leg. So they go through the glute muscles at the back, go through the 6 deep glute muscles that nobody ever mentions, and then they go into your hamstring. So when your knee is locked, you are putting a lot of stretch on your sciatic nerve, especially if you are also bending forward. So very important to keep the knee just soft, but during the movement, don't change the position of the knee. So don't bend or straighten your knee more while you're doing it. Keep your knee exactly the same and just bend forward straight and come back with your back. And you must really focus to squeeze the glute. So you want most of the activation to come from your hamstring and your glute muscle. You don't want the lower back to do the movement. Please people, this is not a balance exercise. So you are allowed to hold on to something. It does not show that you are weak. It just shows that you want proper form. It doesn't help if your ankle is doing this and you are struggling to go down straight with your body. Rather hold on and do a proper up-down movement with good form. If you are really good with balance and you're not struggling with this, you can do it without holding on. But please make sure you don't fiddle with your ankle, because it will take your focus off your glute. Okay, and that brings us to exercise number 4, the hip thrust. So I really love this exercise. I just really don't like setting it up because it takes a lot of time. With the hip thrust, the hip is in a closed position. The hip thrust is the one glute exercise that really focuses on the distal fibers of the glute. So that's that little triangle piece that goes into the hamstring. So you really need to get that piece well developed if you want it to show. So with the hip thrust, it's important not to keep your feet too close to your body, because then it will mainly use your quads to assist you with the movement. So keep them also not too far away from your body, because then you're going to go a lot into your hamstring. So you want them quite in the mid, like when you go up, you want to have a 90-degree angle at your knee, then you're going to get more glute activation. At the top position, try to squeeze and hold still at the top for a few seconds. Try to think about pushing your hips straight up forward. You don't have to arch your back, rather keep the back straight and just push your hips as much forward as you can. You want your legs to move behind you as much as you can with a straight back. This one I really like to sometimes turn my feet outwards so that I'm getting more of the glute max. Since the glute maximus is more of an external rotator than an internal rotator, if you turn the feet a bit outwards, you are going to focus more on the glute max. This is generally a safe exercise for the nerves because not one of them is overstretching in any direction. Okay, then we get to exercise number 5, and that is the squat. So we know that squats is predominantly a quad and hamstring and glute exercise, and if you do it with a wide stance, you'll be focusing more the inner thighs, and if you're doing a narrow stance, you'll be focusing more of the outer thighs. If you're doing it for glute purpose, then just keep your stance not too wide, not too narrow, maybe just hip width. In the first 20 degrees of hip flexion, you will mostly be activating your glute medius and minimus for knee control. When you go lower than 25 to 90 degrees, you'll be focusing more on your glute maximus. So it's good to do a full range of movement with this with the squat so that you get all of those glute muscles. I really do like to do a very deep squat because then you can stretch the glute with weight at the bottom. So I use the squat mainly to stretch the glute under weight. And I really like to put it down on the safety bars and do a raw lift from the bottom up back to the top again. So a very slow controlled down movement, put the weight down and then do a raw lift back to the top again. The squat will mainly target the proximal fibers of the glutes because it is an open range for the hip joint. And then there's this thing with should your feet be facing outwards or inwards? And again, people are born with different hip positions. It is genetically that way. So you should do it with the foot positioned in the way that feels comfortable for your joint, that does not hurt it or make it feel painful. And there's this myth about the knees must not go over the toes, and that is completely utter nonsense. It does not matter. Your knee is supposed to be able to functionally go over your toes. You should be able to do a full squat, not keeping your knees behind your toes. Please do not fall into that rabbit hole. Okay, and that is it for the 5 ultimate glute exercises. Give them a try. They really worked for me. And remember, if you want your glutes to get leaner, you'll definitely need to follow a very specific diet. Thank you for joining. Have a great day.